Hello, everyone. My name is Tender, and I have 4 kids that I have homeschooled. My oldest is now attending college, and my younger 3, I have 2 in high school. One is a junior, Selah, and then I have a son, Elijah. He's just a freshman, and my youngest is Truth, and she is in middle school. So I have these 3 still at home with me, and we're homeschooling still, and we've used Sonlight the whole time. So my son, Charles, we've done a preschool package all the way up to level 400 with him. And so this year, this is my first year doing J. So I'm doing J this year with my 3 here still at home. So, Rhonda, tell us about how many kids you have.
Yeah. So I have 5 children and I homeschooled mostly. The older 2, I didn't start homeschooling them till 3rd and 6th grade. But then after that, I went all the way through. And the younger 3 were homeschooled with Sonlight from preschool through the, I think, 600, the British Lit, and understanding the times and other things. And so they are all graduated from college. The last one graduated last year, but I do have grandchildren now that are being homeschooled with Sonlight. So I get to be involved that way and still get to teach Sonlight literature at a co-op situation with high schoolers. So I love it. I still get to mess with people's brains. I love that. Get them thinking. It's the best ever. So good stuff. Good stuff.
Well, that's fantastic. My name is Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager, and I have 2 children. Mine are in 7th and 2nd grades, and we started homeschooling in preschool with every intention of putting our oldest, our daughter, in school in kindergarten, but we were having so much fun with Sonlight, and she was learning so much, we just kept going. So now we're in our 10th year homeschooling with Sonlight. See, it looks like we have a few more people who have joined us. Ashley from Wisconsin, Jenny from Columbia, and Claire from Colorado. Thanks for joining us today. If Lisa is able to get on, she's our other speaker. She will do that. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and get started so you guys aren't having to wait too long for us to get underway. So welcome to our live Q&A session of this month's Homeschool Helps and Hacks. Like I mentioned, I'm Sunny. I'm Sonlight's community manager. Rhonda and Tender are here with me now, and hopefully Lisa will be able to get on momentarily. But we're going to go ahead and start by going through all the different questions that were asked on Facebook and in our Sonlight app. Thank you to those who submitted great questions. We got several about different areas that you might be thinking of now that you're a few weeks or maybe a full quarter into the school year. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to take a progress report of your current homeschool. If you missed the session earlier or need to go back and watch that one, that's what that was about. But then we're also going to be featuring several of our supplementary products that are on sale currently in our Fall Boost the Basics sale. So if you're thinking you may want to add something, to supplement or help your children with those areas where they're struggling, we'll talk about those things as well. So let's just jump in and start asking the questions. We'll start with math. This is often an area that intimidates people as far as teaching it, or they may not like math. Their kids may not like math. So ladies, can you tell us how to make math fun, whether for your children or for yourself? What do you do if it's not a subject?
Go ahead, Tender.
Okay. I know that we still have our struggles in math, and sometimes like putting it, if it's really struggling, sometimes there are days that we put it away or take a little break, and then we'll come back. But usually and I know that I've talked with my kids of, what is the best time of day to do math? We have friends that they do it before breakfast. Now me, that is not my personal choice. I would prefer to actually eat something before tackling math, but it just, they do it first thing in the morning. They jump on it and get it knocked out. And they just find that waking up and they're so fresh that their kid really responds well to doing math first thing. But I kind of prefer we tend to hold math after we do our reading and read alouds together in the morning. That's kind of what we do after breakfast. And so that's waiting. So I do have done things like let's stand up and do math standing at the math counter, because, as homeschoolers, you don't have to do everything sitting down. Sometimes that helps us, that just changing, it's simple as changing our position can kind of change our perspective on what is sometimes a struggle for us. And so we've done kind of things like that of, let's do math, standing at the kitchen counter versus sitting at a table. And that helps us as well. And then, of course, we really do enjoy using manipulatives, and Math kind of really helps that on the visual part of making math more enjoyable. And one of the other things I've done for one of mine is writing it out on a whiteboard versus working a problem. So working it standing up at a whiteboard, and I let my kids have them. We have some portable ones. So working at a whiteboard really helps and maybe it's again, the position for sitting versus standing. And that they can write it big and it's not little on a piece of paper. That is something that has worked really well with mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree with that. I know you did a little differently, but we tended to do morning just because it was, you're fresh. And I tended to do a lot of things, like if I could, I don't know why, but sometimes I just brought in food, and food seemed to help because it went better. So if we were measuring things or measuring or working with area or whatever, I always tried to think of a way to make it just put it into real life, even more so than what the book had. And so I'd bring in M&Ms and, like, how many M&Ms do you think it's going to take to do thus and such? And then, then we could eat M&Ms. So trying to make it just more alive. Sometimes it can be, sometimes math can get hard because it's a language issue, not so much that they don't understand the concept, but sometimes they don't understand what the word means because it's a mathy word. So sometimes pulling apart the mathy words and putting them into a different, language, they still have to learn the math words, but sometimes that helps, as equals or the same, or these look like the same thing. Just using different language sometimes will help. And sometimes you just kind of have to ask questions to get there. And sometimes you just need a break. Sometimes I would tell my kids, okay, stand up. All right, you're going to run around the table 15 times. All right, touch your toes. All right, back. Here we go. And we would just break it. So.
Yeah, those are great tips. As you can see, I have my big dry erase board back here. We love that for math or spelling words. It's just more fun than paper. And like you mentioned, Rhonda, getting up and moving around. My kids, their gym class is essentially in the middle of everything else. When they get wiggly, they get up and they jump around, and or maybe even combine it with math, do it 15 times. Now, if you do it 10 times, how many times did you go around the table and all, things like that. And Sonlight does offer multiple math programs. We have a ton of different programs that you can choose from. So how do you know what to start with, maybe initially? And then, if that math program is not going well, how do you know when it's time to switch it up or choose a different one?
I think sometimes you just take a stab, try one that you think will work. And I usually had the rule for myself that we went ahead, I guess, unless I never had a situation where it was so awful that we couldn't finish it, but we would just finish it and we would work through. And then the next time we would pick something different, and that's fine. We would just try something different. But sometimes it's that if I can act enthusiastic about it, and if I act like this is totally cool. So sometimes you kind of have to do a sell job on the math. But if you can, sometimes I could do that. I could work them into it, and they'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. This is really fun. And then we would go. So sell jobs like that would be good. So I would say you just read the information. Sonlight has a great chart on the website that compares and contrasts and says what each of the different math steps do. And I think that's a great starting point. And again, every single time your child is going to learn something. So you really can't make a wrong choice. It's going to be okay. You're not ruining your child, right? Tender, we both have engineer children.
That's
And
right.
I didn't just use one math. We used
I mean,
different
he
maths.
actually used 3 different maths, if not, and I really think some people will
Yes.
say, this one is better than this one. I Math is one of those. I think Rhonda's right. You can pick any one and you're going to make it work. But I think that you're working with that child. This math, more than anything else, finding that learning preference, they're going to have a preference for which one works better. So between my 4, I have different, and it really is like my boys are like a certain math program, and then my girls like another, and in what worked for them. So it's just whether it's girl or boy, or it's just their learning styles are different. But my boys are engineer minded, and my girls are not. And so we have chosen different math programs that just seem to work better for some of those preferences. But I think all of them are very good, and they are going to get the job done. And your child can go to college no matter what math program you choose, that you're just going to make some adjustments sometimes and find that one that really is working best for that child's learning preference, what they prefer. And I think Rhonda also touched on it too, that my attitude coming to the table, if I am adjudged that math is not fun for me, makes all the difference. If I'm like, ooh, we get to do fractions today, I love it, and if I have a good attitude and I'm excited, and you can tell them, and my kids know, they were telling some friends, it says, oh, it'd be so nice to have a mom that was really good at math. And I was like, oh, but they were like, but she'll learn with us. But they were like, really about pre-algebra, algebra, you're having to tell mom. and they're right with that, because that is not my gifting. Math is not just what I am extremely gifted at, but we can still do it at home. Oh, and now we're going to get,
Yes.
I'm so
Yeah,
excited.
Lisa's fun.
There's Lisa.
Resident math.
Yay.
So sorry. Much tech support later.
Welcome, Lisa.
So sorry.
Do you want to introduce yourself for everyone who may not be familiar with you? And
So I'm Lisa, one of the Sonlight mentors, not in tech support. I live in Florida. I'm a retired homeschool mom. I have 3 children, and they are all thriving. My 2 girls are Sonlight graduates, kindergarten through senior year, and I love math.
So, Sunny, you need to ask Lisa.
Yes, ask Lisa what we've been talking about. We've been talking about, how Sonlight has multiple math programs to choose from. How do you decide which math program to use? And then if math is not your child's favorite subject, or you personally don't like math, what do you do to make it fun and really engage those students?
Okay, so our math programs fall in 2 different categories: a mastery-based programs or spiral-based programs. And those are words that you probably aren't familiar with. So a mastery-based program is one that teaches a concept through completion and expects that by the time you move to the next lesson, you've mastered that lesson. Generally, they don't have a lot of extra review. So if you have a child that loves math or is bored or frustrated when they have to do the same thing over and over because they already know how to do it, a mastery-based program might be good for that child. The opposite of that is a spiral-based program, and that is probably something like you used in your own schooling experience, where the teacher taught something new and you practiced for a few problems, and then you had a worksheet of what you'd been doing for the last month. And if you have a child that really struggles with math or just needs a lot of repetition or likes repetition, because some of us like predictability, then a spiral-based program would be better. So our spiral programs are Saxon and Horizons. Mastery-based would be Math UC and Singapore. And then Right Start's going to kind of waffle in the middle of that because it's kind of unique. And then you asked me, what about if a child is frustrated or you're frustrated with math? I think the first thing is that we need to make sure we have a good attitude about math. It might not be our favorite subject, but I tell my kids, or I did tell them when they were little, laundry wasn't my favorite subject either, but it was part of my job. And it benefited everyone if I did my job well, because no one wants to see what happens when there's no clean laundry. So it's just part of your job, and it doesn't have to be your favorite thing, but it does have to be done, and it is important. And I think showing how math is important in the real world is important. I think that the Mathtacular DVDs do an awesome job of showing real world math situations. So if you can kind of show them how this is going to benefit them, that's important. I also think there's a lot of benefit in playing in math. The Math Adventures has a lot of games in it that you can do, but you can take math outside with sidewalk chalk or play a card game, or lots of ways that you can make math more fun. If you're learning adding facts and you have an extra wiggly child, just go ahead and ask them to do 5 + 7 jumping jacks instead of telling them to do 12 jumping jacks. So lots of ways that you don't have to do math sitting at the table. I guess that's my point of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you actually touched on Mathtaculars and Math Adventures that are currently 20% off in our Fall Boosted Basics sale. So I've got examples here. If you guys can give us, maybe a little more information about these and how you might use these in addition to your regular math program.
So the Mathtacular DVDs are awesome for reintroducing concepts maybe that were fuzzy when you were going over it pen and paper. They are, the 1 through 3 are just short little clips. They come with great, it has a menu. So if you're stuck on fractions, you can just go right to the fraction section and watch those. The 4 level that Sunny is showing is all about word problems. You're a detective and you have to detect the math language in the math problem. That really is a shutdown for kids. When they get to a word problem, they see all the words and they're like, well, this is math. There shouldn't be all these words. And math really is a foreign language. You have to learn more than, less than, all of those words that mean a math symbol. And so the level 4 does a great job at that. And then it does have the word problem practice book as well. And then it comes with a kit of manipulatives. So it's a great way. Maybe your child is stuck on a particular concept. You can put that aside and go to the Mathtacular. Or maybe it's your Friday math. It's just fun. You don't have to have math class with the math book every day. And then those Math Adventure books, super colorful, have stickers, logic puzzles, lots of vocabulary in there. So that might just be, again, your Friday math day is a little lighter. So you just do a few pages in there. Or you have a doctor's appointment and instead of bringing the math book, you bring that. It's a little extra fun. So lots of ways that you can just add those in to help make math more fun for the child that maybe isn't loving math. Or, hey, like me, I would have thought that was awesome to have an extra work page when I was in math. So that could be another thing too.
Yeah, I know we're big fans of Mathtacular for reinforcement in our house. Like when my son was learning carrying or my daughter was learning long division, what they got in their regular math just wasn't quite enough for it to stick, and they kept forgetting those concepts. And so we would go right to the DVD menu and, pick that out and watch the DVD. And, if it's also a great activity, if you don't want your child, plugged into a screen just for entertainment and you're looking for something educational for them, we use those Mathtacular DVDs all the time in our house. So let's go ahead and move on to language arts. Language arts encompasses so many different things: reading, writing, spelling, vocabulary, penmanship, and more. So there's a lot of different areas where a child may be struggling, or you as the parent may be struggling with how to teach them. So let's start with reading. Sonlight includes so many wonderful read alouds, as you all know if you're using Sonlight. But what do you do if your child's struggling with reading comprehension, or if you think they're not actually understanding what you're reading to them?
I know sometimes with one of mine,
I think one of the biggest things,
Oh, go ahead. I think
I was just going to say one of the biggest things that I did was to read ahead and find out what was going to be happening in the story. Sometimes what I would do is, even before I started to read aloud, is I would find out what it's about, and I would, what I call, front loading my children. And I would talk to them about maybe where the story was going to take place. I would tell them, we would look it up. I would talk about the characters or maybe some of the big problems they were going to face. And what you're doing is you're just putting you're putting a piece of information so that the next piece of information that they're going to get, they have some place to hook that next piece of information onto. So what I call front loading is very, very important. And also, there's nothing wrong with keeping little hands busy, having color sheets while you're reading aloud. Sometimes kids are doodling, whatever it is they can, or quiet Legos. I let my kids do that, and they knew exactly what I was reading. They knew exactly what I was talking about because their hands were busy, their brains were busy, and they loved it. And some of them would, if there was a picture, I remember they would like stop. They'd be like, stop. And then they'd like jump up, onto the couch, look over my shoulders, and then they'd like run back to wherever, they were. And so it was just kind of fluid. And sometimes I would have them tell them, well, okay, when you hear what happened to the rabbit, I want you to get up and like scream it out, like whatever it is. But I'm like, to give that anticipation and then make it fun, that their head is totally, totally engaged. So that's part of some of the things I would do. If you really have a child who is super struggling with the whole thing, with it aloud, sometimes what you may have to do, even though, if, like, let's say you have a 9-year-old and you're thinking, well, Sonlight says that these books are appropriate for Sonlight. And so you're reading aloud and you're going, but my child isn't getting it. You know what? It is perfectly cool and okay. Maybe back up the truck a little bit, get some easier books, and get those muscles going, because you have to build those comprehension thinking muscles. And when they're reading aloud too, I don't know about you, I do this with my high schoolers. I say, so what's going on with the movie in your head as I'm reading? Oh, did you see that scene the way I did? And then I describe what I'm seeing in my head. And then I ask them, well, what are you seeing? And then I say, is it black and white? Is it color? And at first you'll have kids who have only they only have like freeze frame shots. They don't have a movie. But as you develop those skills and you just keep talking, you just keep reading, and I guarantee, I've never seen a kid who can't get it. They will grow. And as long as you are like so enthusiastic about it, and they'll follow. They will follow. And so, yeah, and I do these things even with high schoolers. They need it too. So don't they need it too. And we all do. What's the movie in your head? What's happening in there? Yeah. So, okay, I cut you off like 10 times, Tender. Go ahead.
There must be a little bit of a delay, unfortunately. So we end up getting on each other. But yeah, I do some of what Rhonda was suggesting as well. Like, I will look at some of those questions that that I will ask after the reading, but I will do what Rhonda tells me, what has suggested before I read. And I'll say, okay, today we're talking in this chapter, and I'm going to give them a little bit of an introductory. We're going to be talking about like Aristotle or whatever. And we want to know what was his contributions to King Hero, and so I need you to listen. And so I give some leading questions, like she's saying on that front loading. This is what I need you to be listening for. And when you hear it, you can stop me, like Rhonda was suggesting. And that has really helped with one of mine that just struggles sometimes with like not really getting understanding or getting all the pieces. So if I can kind of help and lead that and say, this is what we're going to be looking for, they just listen more intently too, with that purpose of, mom is going to ask me a question. Well, they should know that they've grown up doing that. That's what we do. And then I have been surprised too, that sometimes I'm like, man, they didn't answer those questions that I asked after the reading, or they didn't seem to get it. But I'll ask at the end of the day, when we're all sitting around with dad eating dinner, I'll say, well, guys, tell dad, what was the most interesting thing you learned today at school? And so I have been pleasantly surprised that what I thought they weren't understanding, or they didn't quite answer the question to the degree I thought, and they were able to tell their dad exactly what we talked about and give immense detail that I thought had escaped them. So a lot of times you will be very surprised that it was like, I just didn't ask it this way, or or leave it open enough, and they described to their dad all that they had read that day, or had heard me read to them that day.
I like to just ask, what was interesting, or what did you learn today? Because a lot of times they answered all of the questions that were in the instructor's guide just in an open kind of thing. They touched on whatever we were supposed to pick out. And just like Tinder was saying, it was allowing them to kind of process it in their own way, instead of asking something very specific that maybe has a right or a wrong answer. And I think sometimes we're afraid to be wrong, so they'd rather be nothing than be wrong. But if you just ask an open-ended question, it will kind of flow out and you'll see what they understood. And then if they didn't get it, I was able to say, well, gosh, the main point of this was whatever, and we could talk about that some more.
Right.
Rhonda, were you about to add something?
I see that he was asking. Yeah, I was going to say, somebody's asking, how about reading to a 13-year-old?
Yes.
And I'm not sure exactly what you mean about reading to a 13-year-old, but the answer is yes. Yes. I mean, yes, you should. There's a few reasons. One, reading aloud to a 13-year-old, even though they're perfectly capable of reading the material themselves, what you're starting to do by the time they're 13, they have enough cognition and thinking ability that you can start to talk to them about, almost at a rhetoric level, or start training them to think critically about what is the background of the author, what is he trying to express here. You can get so much more. And this is all those opportunities, because 13-year-olds are getting to that point of being independent. You're working towards independence, but you're also, it's your time to put forward and talk about those difficult issues with them. And you're doing it in a non-confronting way. You're able to, because you're the adult, you can take those situations in a story and apply them to their life, or your life, or future issues that may happen. And so to me, that's the critical thinking. And she says, no, I refer is that they are like so distracted. Give me some tips, please. I think it has a lot to do with talking to them in the middle of it, really. And sometimes if it's a difficult book, I would be pre-reading. And what Lisa was saying, like, well, not necessarily prescribed questions. I don't know that I actually ever paid attention to the questions that were in the Sonlight guide. I kind of did at first, but I got to the point where I just went with whatever was interesting me in the book and what interesting my kids in the book. And those are the directions that we went. So I kind of never knew what direction we were going to go. And the same story with a different kid can have a different outcome of discussion. And that's what made it fun. And so preparing a little bit, sure. Just kind of scanning quickly. I guess it depends on the level of the book too.
Yeah, and I might say, Jenny, some things that I've tried with my daughter, who's almost 13, we have done both reading aloud together, and then we've also done it more book club style, where she reads it to herself, I read it to myself, and then we come and talk about it. So if you're finding that the child is distracted when you're reading it, that may be an option too. You both read it together, but not actually out loud together, and then come back and discuss it. But I do find, even though she's at the age where she can read alone relationally, it's been really good for us this year, because she's getting to that preteen age where she doesn't always want to, spend time with me, or I'm not cool anymore. But we have that read aloud time together where, we're able to bond over those books. Julie also asked if you pre-read your book sections before you read them aloud, or to what extent you do to prepare for those read alouds. What do you guys typically do?
I tried to always set aside a little time on Sunday to get my life together, I like to call it, because usually by, the weekend, all your stuff is everywhere. So gather up all my books, make sure I had everything. And I liked to read through the instructor's guide. I really looked at the questions. I went through parent notes if there was something coming I needed to be aware of, or any materials I needed to gather. And then put my books all on the working shelf that I needed that week. That was pretty much the extent of my preparation. I am a reader, so I did generally read my child's readers as they got older over the summer, so that I was prepared to talk about it with them. But the read alouds, I did not pre-read any more than the extent of, like Rhonda was saying, where you might see a note and check it out or whatnot. But that's the beauty of Sonlight, is that the preparation part is done for you. You don't have to spend hours and hours getting ready.
Yeah, and
I was thinking too with kind of what you said, Sunny, where you were saying maybe doing a book club style with your daughter. I was thinking for Jenny, for the 13-year-old, one other thing sometimes I do is this, I guess it could require 2 copies of the book, or you could just share. But sometimes we would even partner read, where just take turns reading paragraphs back and forth to each other. That was, it's simple, but they seem to like reading aloud to me sometimes. Mm-hmm. And that's another little tip.
And I still think that's a very good skill to work on as with older students, to have them practice reading out loud. You had them do that when they're learning to read, but they're going to be called on, or at some point need to read aloud themselves. And it's kind of good to develop that skill. And so that is a very good suggestion, Rhonda. And I do have a daughter that really likes to do art, or have her hands, crocheting or doing something with her hands, that she will do something like that still as a preteen and listening.
Yeah, and as far as preparation, I think the longer you use Sonlight, the better you get about trusting that you don't really have to prepare. Now I literally open my IG when I'm ready to start doing school, and I don't look at anything before that. If there's the little parent note emblem, I'll go and look at that before we read something. But you've got, discussion questions in there. You've got instructions on how to teach everything. And so that's one of the things I love about Sonlight, is that I don't have to prepare anything. Once everything's in my IG notebook, then I'm ready to go. So yeah, you really don't need to do a lot of prep.
I have also enjoyed that now when you have multiples and you're doing a level a second time, that you've read it once. And now when I first did it, I was a little concerned I thought, I'm going to be bored. I've read all these books and things before, and I'm not going to enjoy doing it with my younger children. Oh, that is so far from the truth. I have so enjoyed going through all the books a second time, and I have felt like I have personally gained more as I go through the second time. And I just love that, with different kids, you're going to focus on different things, or what they will pick up will be different. And so it's been very enjoyable doing it with multiple kids. So there is that of, once you kind of have done one and you're doing it again, I have found it very enjoyable.
That's so true. And what about if your child loves to listen to you read, but they're struggling with learning to read themselves? How do you teach them phonics and all of the things that they need to know to read without spending all day and them getting frustrated about it?
I certainly wouldn't spend all day because that's only going to lead to frustration. That doesn't mean I wouldn't maybe revisit it after lunch if we tried in the morning. I did have one that was not a natural reader, I could say. But we just kind of went at her pace through the Sonlight levels and finding outside reading outside of school that she enjoyed. That was really the key for us. Was she was learning to do it, but it just wasn't her thing until we found that book. And then she wanted more of those books. And I also think there is a lot of value in being a reader yourself, showing your children that reading is enjoyable. It's a good way to pass time, just being positive about it. But I certainly wouldn't spend all day. 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes after lunch would be a gracious plenty, I think, especially if someone is struggling. But just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I think a little bit every day is,
Yeah.
in some of that, it's like, you don't know if you're really making the progress because on the day by day, but when it's just every day and, and if you turn on a timer and it's just, we're going to do 20 minutes worth. And like Lisa said, I have one that has done their reader schedule. I mean, they read at a different pace than my other kids. And so we went through the summer reading, but I thought has been very good, and they needed that to not take breaks from reading. But we just slowed it way down than what was in our schedule, and just let it, if we set a timer, this is what we're going to read, the amount that will be read today, or whatever happens in this amount of time. That is like, how do you eat the elephant? It's one bite at a time. And you just do and so sometimes that slow progress, you're not seeing, am I really making a difference? But it does, just the little every day, math is kind of that same way. You need it every day. And it's that little bit of it, time spent every day really helps to build that foundation that we want.
Absolutely. And right now we have Explode the Code and MCP Phonics on sale for 15% off. Can you ladies describe these and let us know how they might be a good supplement if your child really is struggling with their phonics?
That's what I was going to talk about, was that Explode the Code is really something that when I used to teach in public school, I taught elementary school. And for children who were struggling with phonics, and they had a program called Reading Recovery. Well, that Explode the Code series is based upon, it's kind of the same formatting and the same kinds of skills. One thing about the Explode the Code too, it really doesn't matter if you have a child who's taking off like a bunny rabbit and doing great with that phonics. I enjoyed having those Explode the Codes around because they have silly little pictures, just right for elementary school type of humor, and silly little sentences just right for silly humor. My boys particularly enjoyed them. And what it helped me do was we'd be eating breakfast, or maybe we did our math or did our Bible reading or something. And I'm like, okay, I really don't want help, because, sometimes I don't want help. I just want to clean up breakfast myself fast. And they'd be at the table and I'd be like, do your Explode the Code. They would happily do it. And they're learning so much. And it's so wonderful because it's doing all the things that they need to be doing as sometimes struggles. It's having them learn that visual discrimination, where it makes them choose between an N and an M, or a P and a D to build a word. So they're going to build words, and then they're going to progress from looking at the top of the page and have to pull those words down. So it's not just building visual skills. It's doing a lot of things. It's not just phonics, it's visual memory, it's your hand-eye coordination, all the things that have to happen to be able to read. those things are happening that explode the code. So yes, I am like explode the code queen. I love them. I think they're wonderful. And the other thing that it does teach them, their short A's and long A's, and does all the things, and in a fun way, really, and quick. Again, I think Lisa's so right, and so is Tender. Like we don't beat our children with phonics. We don't beat them. We just get in there, do the job, spend a few minutes. And if whatever the lesson was that day, sometimes we would have a blast. I would like, ooh, do you think that word is in our reading today? And then we would find that word in our little reader book. And then we enjoy pulling that apart. So again, just that connecting things together for them. That's what you do, because you're a mom and you know how, because you do this for them every day of their lives. You make those connectors. Same thing with phonics. And be patient, because all the little bunny rabbits go off at different rates, but they will be reading. They will be fine. It will happen. Just different rates. It's okay.
I really enjoyed them when I was teaching multiple children. If I was working on math with someone and the other person was supposed to be doing their reader, but they finished quickly, it was self-explanatory, because it is so, every unit follows the same pattern. So it wasn't something that I needed to explain or whatever. They just knew to do the next 2 pages or whatnot. So it was a great way to just give them something to do. So, because the alternative was they'd be off playing, Barbie dolls or something, and then they'd never want to come back to school when I finished with their sister's math lesson or whatnot.
And actually, those explode the code, I think, are really good at developing audio skills as well. And like that, because, and it's important in phonics, because they're asking you for what sound. Are you hearing the beginning sound, the middle sound, or the end sound? And that is that's a very important skill that sometimes when you're having to go back or do remedial, catching of what they're not hearing or differentiating the sounds. And explode the code was really, really good at listening for the first sound that you hear in the word, or the middle sound, or the end sound. And so that is just a really good skill that it does and develop.
That's great. Yeah. And when it comes to writing, whether it's creative writing or an essay, what should a parent be focusing on, especially in those early years? Are we looking more for content, spelling, handwriting, grammar? I mean, there's so many different things involved with writing. And if a child is struggling in one or more of those areas, it might be difficult for them to write. So what do you focus on?
When we were in the creative expression part, my concentration was on communication. I wasn't worried about their handwriting or their spelling or their grammar. It was on communicating. So especially in the early years, we did a lot of talking through, and I would do the writing, because I wanted them to learn to gather their thoughts and then express their thoughts. And I think as Sonlight's creative expression assignments progress, they really do a great job of that, especially in the diamond notes section, where you start to gather up those ideas and fill in your bases and your home plate and your pitcher's mound. You really work through that pre-writing, gathering yourself together, and then putting it into correct grammar and things like that. But if it's a struggle, I would focus on that process of having an idea and conveying your idea to other people, because that's really the point of writing. You want to have an idea that you can then express and get other people to understand you.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. A lot of times Sonlight will have a day, you can tell like one of the exercises is doing exactly what Lisa's talking about, which is, again, preparing them to write, which is if you don't have anything in your head and you get a prompt and you have to write about it, you hate it because there's nothing in your head that you want to write down. So if you think in terms of that, is that you want to help your child, feed their brain, talk with them, maybe draw pictures of a certain things, whatever you want to do. That's what I would do, is front load that way and make it so that they can, and it could be too, if they really hate writing and they get overwhelmed, you may want to do maybe in the morning time, or maybe even the next day. So the one morning, maybe you do the pre-writing exercise where they're learning and you're thinking and you're talking and you're gathering all the things and all the ideas that they can put down on the paper. And maybe you take a couple notes for them. And then the next day, let them, there's nothing wrong with breaking that up. And then the next day, have them write it down, review what you guys talked about the day before, and then put it down. I've even had kids just do a thing of, they can record themselves. If they are better, really good verbalizers, well, then just record themselves, and then they can just kind of copy down their work. And what usually happens is, it's just like that old, Greek myth. At first, you're at the bottom of the hill and you're pushing up that big rock, and it feels really, really, really hard. But eventually, you move that stone, eventually it'll start rolling itself. Sometimes it takes a little bit of work, but they'll get there. Trusting Sonlight Language Arts as far as their writing goes, I think it's well worth it. And she says, what grade level did you use, etc., up to? All the way up through high school. And I think Lisa did too, right? Like pre-K through high school. And my son has a doctorate degree, and he writes, things for journals and stuff like that. And he was a reluctant writer, I will tell you that. But he just needed to know what he wanted to write about. The other thing you can do is, if the prompt that the child is supposed to write about, maybe it's something general about, like, what's your favorite pet? And that doesn't thrill them. So change it. Change it to, well, if we went to the zoo, which animal would you want to see and why? Right? I mean, you can still kind of use the prompt, but make it something that is enjoyable for them, and let them go for it.
I think that most of us use, like, Explode the Code through what Sonlight scheduled. Like, that starts in kindergarten, they do Before the Code. In first grade, they're doing more of the code, and then second grade, they still do Beyond the Code. Or I might not be having those names right. And they're a group of 3 books. So they are scheduled in the Sonlight Language Arts in the K, and it's an optional, but it is a very, it's worth the while to have that optional Explode Code book, because Sonlight has done a great job of integrating the words that you will find in Explode the Code. Rhonda was correct. They're going to find them in their readers and in their spelling words and the phonics rule that you're working. So it's all integrated. And so I would definitely say up to second grade, and use all of the Explode the Code workbooks that go with that. Starting with third grade, that's where they transition and do some of the MPC phonics books. And it starts with MPC phonics C, and then it goes from there. Yes, those books. That is still kind of along those same vines of what Explode the Code did, and that they fit in really well with the language arts. And then also the diamond notes are as on sale as well. And those those are in the language arts 3 as part of, as we're teaching creative writing. So and I would say on my part of answering that creative writing assignment, if they're working on creative writing assignment, I am not looking at spelling. I am not looking at handwriting, like Lisa and Rhonda said, because when we're going to work on, it's all separate at this point, because it is so hard to connect that creative writing process part of your brain to the analytical part of the brain, or the getting it down on the piece of paper. And I've had my children too, that, Sonlight has you scribe. I have scribed for my kids on the creative writing process for 2 of mine for a while, up until close to middle school. And it is, it's like, oh, it should happen before then. Sometimes it's different. We all learn at different rates. And you are your child's advocate, and you want the best, and you're not trying to, but you just keep working at it a little bit at a little bit. I am now seeing where I have scribed for a long time, they are now able to do an outline and then come back and write it themselves without me. So that is real encouraging. It just sometimes it does not happen. My rule of thumb, what I've seen, it doesn't work the same for any of them. It's all at different stages. So just keep the course, and it will work.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like you mentioned, the scribing, that's what I'm still doing with my younger son, because he has all these creative thoughts that just spill out when you ask him, what he wants to write, but there's no way he can actually write all of that or spell all those words yet. And so I scribe for him, and eventually I know he'll get there. We are running kind of low on time, so I did want to point out some of the other things that we have in the sale. Writer's Ink, which is just a general, if your child needs help with writing, but then if your child is struggling with vocabulary, we have Wordly Wise as well on sale. For grammar, we have Grammar Ace. And then for handwriting, we have 2 of our handwriting programs on sale. Ladies, can you tell us, is handwriting even important? I mean, considering that most people type, what do you guys think about handwriting? I know I see a lot of questions about that. Is it important to teach that? Does a child need to learn cursive? Should people be checking those items out as well?
Yes, because the connection from words that are in your brain coming down and going down to the pencil point with you in your grip, there's a lot of processing that happens with that. And it's not the same thing when you're typing on a computer. So yes, handwriting is important. Handwriting could be that you need to take quick notes in class or write something down quickly. You need to be able to read somebody else's notes. Yes, you teach handwriting, you teach cursive. Cursive is important also because ball and stick letters are beginning type things, but if you think about how you make those, the print, it's just one figure at a time. Cursive is allowing your brain to keep the flow of thought going. And that's another important piece about cursive. So yes, I believe in it greatly. I'm a mean mommy. My my high schoolers have to annotate in their books. So they must write with a pencil in their books. They can't just highlight. They must make notes so that they can find what they want to find. So yes, you do need yes. Yes.
I think my daughter has definitely discovered that for her to learn the material, she has to write it down. And she's really good. Like, she's taken off with the handwriting. I got her the Getty Dobby because it is more kind of like calligraphy based. And so for some, like my daughters who really like to do hand lettering, that is a thing these days, that Getty Dobby is great because it is a calligraphy stroke. And she has discovered, she's my junior here, and she's doing like in her science, she realizes if she draws and write things out, so she has these really nice notebooks that she has written out the vocabulary that she will understand and learn her science. And so she is putting into practice those things. And, and it's not every child, that might not be their way of learning, but she's definitely learning that is the way that she learns best and can recall it for tests, is if she has handwritten it down, she can recall it when she goes to take a test.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to mention that and I forgot to say it, but that's so true, Tender. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that also brings into view that a lot of people have a more creative mind. They like hands-on, whether it's writing something out or doing hands-on activities, and it does help reinforce what they're learning. But what do you do with kids who don't like those activities, or maybe you have a creative child who likes those activities and the parents don't like that? How do you teach like science experiments and any of those creative things if that's not your favorite thing to do?
Well, I think the hands-on kits that Sonlight provides are awesome for that, because really, I think as moms, what we don't like is trying to find all the stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, if we had all the stuff, it wouldn't be so bad. So I think that the kits are awesome. And again, I think as moms, we need to foster what our child loves, even if it's not what we love. And just kind of go with what they're looking for. Just like when, you were dating your husband, I watched a lot of football games, and I don't like football, but I watched them because it made him happy. So I think the same thing is kind of true for your kids. If that's where their bent is, and someone is doing the hard work of gathering all the supplies, making the directions, telling you when to do it, that you can jump in there, and you might find out that you might enjoy it. I don't know. I haven't enjoyed football yet, but there's.
I have been amazed that your attitude has so much to do with it, and I have been, in my tastes have changed. That things that I wouldn't have ever been drawn to, that my kids just are naturally. I'm not an artist, but I have kids that are more art driven. I'm just so amazed. And so then as we find what would be able to, can you make something that goes along with what we're reading about? And they're very happy to oblige, and I'm happy to see where their creativity goes. And I have found that my tastes have changed. I don't know. I don't think I would still like football either, but but as your kids do things or have an interest, and you foster that and look at that, then it's like, oh, and you begin to grow too. So school is not just for kids, it's for moms too. God, I think, has work to do in both the kids and the moms. And so I have really appreciated all that I have been able to learn and relearn over the years.
Yeah, I agree. And we've always, any of those creative projects, because my youngest, he really is way more creative than my older child. So I've learned with him that I need to step it up and do more of those projects. So you can't skip a science experiment with him. You have to do it. That's his favorite thing. And so I try to plan, when am I going to be the most relaxed, or when do I have the most time, to do those projects? Or like Lisa mentioned, the hands-on history kits. That's one of my personal favorites, because everything's already in the box. But yeah, I think one of the advantages to homeschooling is that you really do get to know what excites your child and how they learn best. And so part of that progress report and figuring out how your child is doing is figuring out what they're learning and how they're learning it. And, if you need to supplement, we do have great supplementary items to do that. But also you really can trust that Sonlight has thought of most of those things ahead of time. And so the kits are great to use. So ladies, we are out of time. Thank you so much for providing all of this information. And it's been great speaking to you today. I'm glad we all made it on eventually. And for those of you that are watching live, thank you so much for your questions. If we did not get to yours, or if you posted in the app or Facebook and we did not get to yours, please make sure to repost those items, because we would love to answer those. You'll get great tips, from our mentors and advisors, as well as other Sonlight parents. And you can also reach out to our Sonlight advisors for personalized suggestions. So thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good.